It's the morning of Saturday, May the 30th. Looking very much forward to the boxing that starts later tonight on Sky Sports. I've just got out of bed. Watched the Chris Algieri versus Amir fight. I didn't have the energy to wait up and watch the fight live last night. So, yeah, I've been up for about an hour or so. What a way to start preparing for the boxing tonight, but to watch Chris Algieri Khan last night. And it was a really, really excellent fight. Now, just briefly before I get into it, sometimes in boxing, I believe that it is possible to have a very close fight where the scorecards are very wide. Now, put simply, this comes down to the way we score boxing fights with the 10-point must system. Now, all of these rounds were very competitive. Chris Algieri was live pretty much for every minute of this fight. He did eye-catching work, he performed with extreme credit, and the fight was a very close fight. Having said that, in terms of the scorecards, I agree that Amir Khan was a clear winner. And at the end of the day, that does, that is a reflection of what the sport of boxing is. So credit to Amir Khan for that, because all you've got to do is win the rounds. But, the scorecards 117, 111, that seemed a tiny bit wide to me, but 116, 112, 115, 113, I think that's about right. And I don't really see a strong argument that Algieri won this fight. Even though he was competitive, even though he performed with immense credit, I just edged towards Amir Khan in all of the rounds. Now, I'm an Amir Khan fan. I've followed him since the beginning. I'm sure the majority of us have. He's someone I really enjoy watching. He's got immense amounts of attributes. He's always in entertaining fights, and I've followed him from the beginning. But despite the fact that I'm Amir Khan, I'm going to speak the truth in this video, and I'm going to be honest, because the fact that I'm an Amir Khan fan doesn't supersede the fact that I'm a boxing fan. And I think it doesn't, there's no point denying the truth just because you like a certain fighter. And in my opinion, this was a flawed performance from Amir Khan. There was a few positives first. I'm going to touch on the positives. I felt it was a disciplined performance from Khan to an extent. I think he relied on his fundamentals, and when it was getting into a bit of a scrap, he kind of was able to throw a flashy combination, move away, wheel away. I thought at times he looked quite classy in the fight with his hand speed combinations, his foot movement, and there were some times that he was landing quality shots. So it was all in all a decent performance from Amir Khan. It was a performance he deserved to win, and he did well against a guy who is a very good fighter himself in Chris Algieri, who coincidentally is another guy who is a very entertaining guy to watch, in my opinion. But whilst he did enough to beat Chris Algieri in this fight, I have concerns. Amir Khan's fought Collazo, Diaz, Devin Alexander and Chris Algieri since he moved up from 140. And all of those fights, they've been against a level of opposition, but let's say not a top 5 welterweight level. And having seen this fight, I have some concerns. For a start, the first thing I noticed in this fight, and it's often something I comment about in my videos, is the size difference here. Now, Chris Algieri looked by far the bigger man. Not only the bigger frame, the taller man, but also he kind of looked like just a bigger specimen physically as well, which surprised me because I thought of Amir Khan now as a big welterweight. And, Chris Algieri is someone who's moving up to fight at the full 147 limit for the first time. Now, I think the size difference in this fight was very relevant, very relevant. And I think Amir Khan's best attribute in some of his fights is his long jab. And I think to an extent, Chris Algieri was able to negate the Khan jab in a way that, say, Devin Alexander or Luis Collazo was not able to. I think Algieri was able to negate it by two ways. Firstly, he's an awkward mover. It was hard for Khan to sort of set himself because Algieri's always spinning and wheeling. But secondly, just the size of Chris Algieri. The fact that Chris Algieri is kind of a long, rangy guy himself. It wasn't as easy for Khan to tee off with the jab and the long 1-2 from range. So I thought the size was relevant. I I was also very surprised by the way that Algieri fought the fight. You know, he kind of forced the pace. He was very much the come forward fighter. He fought on the inside, and I thought he won possibly the battle of the inside. You know, he came in on Amir Khan. He's throwing shots to the body. He was trying to push Khan back, and he had success when doing it. I mean, fundamentally, Khan is a guy who is best on the outside, and he won. Again, you know, as I say, Algieri won the fight on the inside. Khan did win the fight on the outside, but it was a less convincing outside win than the fight against Devon Alexander, for example. And I think that is to do with Algieri's movement and Algieri's size. And the difficulty here is when you face the top level guys in the division. Well, if we look at a few of them, for example, you've got guys like Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao and Tim Bradley, who can move. You've got guys like Kell Brook, Keith Thurman, who are very big at the weight, you know. If a guy like Chris Algieri is potentially more competitive from the outside because, you know, he's a bigger guy, because he can move, because he doesn't allow Khan to set himself, potentially this is where Khan could find a step up from sort of top 15 welterweight level to top 5 welterweight level, troublesome. So Chris Algieri, I liked his performance. He showed a lot of different sides to his game. You know, we're used to him being the sort of dancing, running, back foot, jabbing boxer we saw him against Provodnikov. But as I say, here he came forward. And one thing I've got to pick up upon, and I think this is relevant, is in my eyes, it looked like Chris Algieri may have been the power puncher in there. And I know that's a controversial statement. But let's be honest, like, Amir Khan, yeah, he caught Chris Algieri nicely a few times. But at no point whatsoever did he look like dropping Chris Algieri. And if you look at the guys Khan's fought at 147, Algieri, Collazo, Alexander, they're all durable guys. These are not guys who's easy to knock out. But I think it's quite telling that Khan hasn't been able to stop any of those guys. You know, even the fact that largely they've been one-sided fights. I don't see Amir Khan as having the power at 147 that he carried at the lower weights. You know, for me, it's not there. And the way Chris Algieri was landing on Amir Khan, it was interesting. I was very surprised at Algieri's continued success. From my eyes, Algieri landed with two main punches. One was a kind of fairly long left hook that was overly telegraphed. The other was a kind of MMA style overhand right that Algieri threw. Now, I don't know anything about MMA, so I'm kind of making this up, but it's how I picture an MMA right. And Chris Algieri kind of ducked his knees and kind of came over like overhand and, you know, landed on Khan like that. And very often, Chris Algieri would use his range and his length, and he would throw from way back. He'd just bend over and come forward like this. And it surprised me because it was such a long punch. It took such a long time to arrive. You know, Chris Algieri didn't have the hand speed of Khan, and yet it was landing persistently. And what surprised me is after 2, 3, 4 rounds with these punches landing, where was the Khan adjustment? You know, where was the Khan adaptation? He was still coming back with his chin in the air, and his hands just weren't in the right place. You know, if you're constantly getting hit here, put your hands up. Like, I didn't get it. The lack of adjustment there was very, very telling, and it allowed Chris Algieri potentially to land the more eye-catching shots. Now, I'm not saying Algieri did enough to win. Even that rounds where he was landing the odd eye-catching shot, on balance, I was still scoring to Khan due to the overall quality and work rate. But the way Chris Algieri was landing those shots on Amir Khan, we know Amir Khan does not have an iron chin, and we know Chris Algieri punches like a small child in terms of his power. So if he's able to land those sort of shots on Amir Khan, you've got to wonder what would a Kell Brook or a Keith Thurman do to Khan. Because if Khan remains defensively open against a guy like Kell Brook, that could be enough to change the fight. Against Chris Algieri, it wasn't enough. But even if Brook doesn't knock him out with a shot, Brook may make his legs go. Brook may put him on the back foot for a round. Brook may make him go into a defensive shell. You know, it doesn't just have to be a knockout. These kind of punches can change the course of a fight. They can make a fighter go backwards. So, all in all, I found that perhaps the biggest concern, really. I thought Chris Algieri was somewhat able to negate the Khan outside game. Not enough, but enough to suggest that a truly elite technician like Floyd Mayweather could potentially negate the outside game. And Chris Algieri again highlighted weaknesses in the Khan inside game and the Khan defence. And that defensive slip-up was poor in my eyes because it was repeated. You know, getting hit like by a sort of overhand right from range is possibly bad enough. But for that to happen 6, 7, 8 times and still be going up with your chin in the air and your hands in the wrong place is rookie. You know, at the end of the day, ask yourself this. If you kept getting punched by that hit, if you kept getting hit by that punch even, you know, if I was in a fight and someone kept hitting me with the same punch, I'd be nervous. You know, you'd think, oh, got to avoid that. It's obvious stuff. And how a fighter as elite as Amir Khan is not making those adjustments, it really, really did surprise me. But, you know, all in all, a great performance from Chris Algieri. He gave Khan a lot more troubles than Devin Alexander and Luis Collazo. And I think the reason he was able to do that was the fact that he had that adaptation. You know, he showed that he was a lot more than what we're used to him seeing. He's shown that he's strong at the weight, that he's a big guy at the weight, that he can come forward, that he can punch to the body, that he can fight on the inside despite his long limbs. Now Khan, for me, it's a 6 out of 10 performance. Credit to him, he was disciplined. As always, he showed the hand speed. As always, he showed the footwork. As always, he, you know, clearly a quality operator. Credit to him. He beat a good guy in Chris Algieri, and he beat him with a bit in hand. You know, there was a bit of comfort there. Even though it was a close fight, you give it clearly to Amir Khan. You give it to Amir Khan by 2, 3, 4 rounds. You know, the decision is not in jeopardy. Khan did enough. But for me, you know, Khan is a guy who is so reliant on the outside game and the long 1-2. And the fact that Chris Algieri, you know, I just didn't see the jab being as effective from Amir today as it has been in previous fights. And the fact that that came against Chris Algieri gives me concerns about a top 5 fighter at 147. Because we know Khan is defensively frail at the elite level. We know Khan is frail on the inside at the elite level. We know Khan is frail in terms of his durability at the elite level. So if there's a way of removing that outside long 1-2, you know, if there is a way of removing that and taking that away from him, then he's going to struggle. And if I was Floyd Mayweather looking at the effect that Chris Algieri was having, you know, with that... Chris Algieri was throwing, like, almost a hook and a sort of straight backhand right. I mean, these are Floyd's bread and butter. I think Chris's legs were able to unsettle Khan slightly, you know, stop him from teeing off as much as we've seen before. Again, that's Mayweather's bread and butter. You know, it's a fight where Khan did well, but it's a fight which gives me more questions than answers about how he will do when he fights a top 5 welterweight. You know, Luis Collazo, top 25. Devin Alexander, top 15. Chris Algieri, in my eyes, just outside the top 10. Probably number 11, number 12, right? But when you've got guys like Bradley, Furman, Brook, Mayweather, Marquez, Porter, I mean, these are really difficult fights. If Brook or Furman land on Khan, like Algieri did, it's a tough night. If Porter is on the inside on Khan, like Algieri was, it's a tough fight. Let me know your thoughts. As always, keen to discuss. Many thanks for watching.